everyone. Welcome to Women Work Your Faith. My name is Sylvia Johnson, and today I'm going to be covering the Sunday school lesson for Sunday, July the 16th. The subject for that Sunday's lesson is dedication of the temple. Our Bible basis is from Ezra, the 6th chapter, the 13th verse through the 22nd verse. Our Bible truth is God loves for his children to be filled with joy. The memory verse, and the children of Israel, the priests and the Levites, and the rest of the children of the captivity kept the dedication of this house of God with great joy. And that is Ezra, the 6th chapter, the 16th verse, and it's the King James Version. So our lesson aims for today are, by the end of the lesson, we will understand that we should celebrate with joy what God has done in our lives, desire to celebrate God's blessings with joy, and celebrate God's blessings with joy. Joy. Okay, if you don't know, celebrating with joy is a big focus here. So welcome back. I have not done a Sunday school lesson, I guess, in about 3 weeks. And so I do apologize. I've had a wonderful time, though, enjoying the summer and vacationing and resting. And everybody needs to learn to have some balance and take a break. And then now that we're getting back into this, I decided to go ahead and do this week's lesson because the book Ezra and Nehemiah are not books in the Bible that I run to, right? And so I really pressed myself to stop and read this and find what it was saying and how I helped myself understand it deeper. Because again, they're not books I run to. And so today's lesson, it's short, but it's got a lot of good points. And hopefully we can roll through this. And if you have any questions or things that the lesson spoke to you, please put them in the comments. I learn when I'm teaching in church, I learn so much from the people in my class. Or when I'm in a class in church, I learn so much from the questions that other people ask. So it's a help to me. It makes me learn better, be a better teacher, be a better disciple, and makes me study more in the Word. So please share your comments or your questions. So the lesson starts out, and really the last few weeks have progressed through the story of the children of Israel who have decided to return from exile back to Jerusalem. And so the last few weeks have carried us through some of the events that have occurred and the works that they've done and who has returned back from exile. And it's interesting to note that, well, I'll save that. We'll get to that in a minute. So they are now here, and I'm just going to start with the lesson because I don't want to get ahead of myself. And it says in 6 and 13, then Tatnai, governor of this side, the river, I'm going to struggle. I'm from Kentucky. We don't say words like this all the time. Shetharbazanzeh, Shethar-Bozneh, there we go. And their companions, according to that which Darius the king had sent, so they did speedily. So before this, there had been some research done by Darius, who was over all of the land, right? This is one of the great empires that the children of Israel were now under exile under. And there had been some discussion, some letters about what these people in Jerusalem were doing sent to Darius. And what had happened was years before, Cyrus had given them permission to start rebuilding their temple, rebuilding their walls, returning to their city. And so people were getting in their way and holding them up. And I don't want to spend too much time on that. But then also they were holding themselves up, right? And so the news came back to Darius, who was now over the land. And he did some research and he sends a letter with his seal and his official saying, basically, let them do what they're doing. They can rebuild their temple to their God. Give them what they need. Do not stand in their way under pain of death. And so he cleared the way for them to not only rebuild their temple, but to have all the resources that they needed to get it done. And that's a very significant contribution to this story because, well, to this lesson, because so many times throughout the Bible, we in our people in their own strength, their own prosperity, their own resources, try to make things happen. But we see in this case, as with many others, it was not going to happen without the Lord intervening and turning the heart of the ruler to the people. They were exiles, okay? They didn't have any right to any land or resources or anything to build much of nothing if someone did not give it to them, right? But God made the way that they had everything they needed to do his will. And so it starts in the lesson where the governor and their companions, those who were standing against, these were people who were standing against the children of Israel, those people that were over the land there. When they got the letter back from Darius that said, leaving people alone and help those people and get out of their way, they did what they were commanded to do. And starting in 14, it says, and the elders of the Jews builded and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, the son of Iddo. And they builded and finished it according to the commandment of the God of Israel and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. So, how are you doing, Patricia Hughes? Thank you for joining me. Good evening to you. So it says they prospered under the prophecy of Haggai and Zechariah. And so I have those in the description box. And it's important to note that they were two different messages, but they were both directed towards what was occurring at this time. And so Haggai was his message from the Lord. And Haggai was more mature in age. I don't want to call him old. But his message was speaking to the fact that, you all have come back to Jerusalem and you're taking care of your business, but you haven't taken care of my business. And it starts in Haggai, the first chapter. And if you read through the first and the 11th verses of that first chapter, it's God posing rhetorical questions to his children who have returned to his land. The other part of that, and I want to in Zechariah. Zechariah's message was to the children about God returning his mercy towards them. So just give me a second. I'll pull that up. Let's see. Right in front of it. So if you're in Zechariah 1:1, in that first opening, he's calling the nation for repentance. And then if we continue on to the 16th verse, there's a vision that is seen, and they question the Lord and they ask him about the vision. And God is talking about how he was angry and jealous for Israel, but now he's disgruntled with these people who've been over them, and his mercy has returned. And he said, therefore, and this is in Zechariah, the first chapter, the 16th verse, therefore, thus saith the Lord, I am returned to Jerusalem with mercies. My house shall be built in it, saith the Lord of hosts, and a line shall be stretched forth upon Jerusalem. And so here we are now seeing that the prophets are speaking again, and they are speaking that God is telling them, build my house, return to my land. My mercies are now turning towards you. And this was the God who was angry with them for their sin, who was angry with them for their rebellion, which is how they ended up in exile. And so now you have his blessing to return and to do his work. And so they do his work, which is also important to note because so many times in the Bible, someone came as the prophet from God, told them what the Lord said, and they didn't do it. But here they heard the word and they did what he said to do. And it says they prospered through the prophesying, and they built it and they finished it according to the commandment of the God of Israel and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. So first, according to God's commandment, which told them to go back, you can go back now. And God's commandment said, build my house. Don't waste your time getting your house and your things in order. Take care of what you need to do with me first. And then the blessings that came through the mercy of God through the rulers in the land. So it says, and this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. And the children of Israel, the priests and the Levites, and the rest of the children of the captivity kept the dedication of this house with great joy, and offered at the dedication of this house of God 100 bullocks, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and for a sin offering for all Israel, 12 he-goats, according to the number of the tribes of Israel. So they gave a great offering. And it, in your Sunday school book, in the commentary taps on this, maybe more than a little bit, but this offering of sacrifice to dedicate the temple was kind of like a reenactment of how Solomon dedicated the first temple, except it was much smaller in scale. So if we go back to 1 Kings, and we're going to 1 Kings, the 8th chapter, the 63rd verse. It says, "And Solomon offered a sacrifice of peace offerings, which he offered unto the Lord 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the children of Israel dedicated the house of the Lord." And so they were making this peace offering to God in both situations. However, if you kind of look at the difference here, and I don't want to say humbly, because I'm sure in order for the offering to be accepted by God, they all had to come to him humbly. But they were in a much more prosperous position when Solomon built that temple. And this temple by no means matched in comparison. But in this situation, they were coming to God after a long period of suffering due to their own sin, which they had brought on themselves. They were less prosperous. I told you they only had what they were granted. Whereas at the time that Solomon made the sacrifice, they ruled the land, right? They had it. Everything in the land was theirs. And so he's bringing 120,000. Whereas in this lesson, they're in the hundreds, 200 and 400. They had 400 lambs. And it still seems like a lot to us, but it just shows the contrast of their position. However, in your sacrificing, the quantity is not what matters. And I wrote down here right before I logged on, that's why I was a little bit late. And I'll add it to the description later. Jesus talks about the value of your giving. And so in Luke 21:2, flipping through my Bible a lot today, Jesus makes an observation and teaches a powerful lesson for all of us who think we must be always heavy in our giving. And I'll start from the first verse, and this is in chapter 21 of Luke. It says, "And he looked up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury. And he saw also a certain poor widow casting in thither 2 mites." A very small portion of money. "And he said, Of a truth I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast in more than they all. For all these have of their abundance cast in unto the offerings of God, but she of her penury hath cast in all the living that she had." And so she gave more, not because her gift was so large or so grand. Her gift was more because she had so little to give to begin with. Her out of her poverty or her lack, her destitution, she still reached in and gave a sacrifice to God. And so the fact that this sacrifice that the children of Israel were making in Ezra was significantly smaller, it was so much more if it was sincere, because they listened to the prophet saying, you're building your house, you're getting your lands together, but my house is still, half done. You're like, what are we doing here? And they listened, and instead of hoarding and prepping and storing for themselves, they gave a peace offering to God. They reached in, to what was given to them as resources so that they could prosper and live in the land, and they sacrificed it to God. And so many times with us, we think that, especially, as people who come back to God, right? Like people like me, raised in the church, went out, lived in the world, and then came back to God, or people who are coming to God for the first time and know nothing about the church. You're so concerned, is my gift good enough? I'm not doing all that she does. I don't have all that she does. I can't sing like he did, or I can't, work as hard. Or people, I've noticed this a lot working in the church, people who have aged, they think they're not as worthwhile or they're not as useful. But give out of the abundance that you have and give it sincerely to God, and it will be worth more than all of whatever else people give, because it's easy. And I think Kanisha and I talked about this. It's easy to give to God when you've got plenty and you ain't gonna miss it. But when you are struggling to bring it, to carry it, to find it, to give to God, the value of that gift is so much more. And so their gift was so small in comparison to what happened at the start of the first temple built by King Solomon. However, remember, when your gift is sincere, the value of it is great to God. And so there's no reason to look at it or despise small beginnings, right? And so because of that, you can give your gift with joy like they did. They didn't run up to the altar and be like, well, all I got is one sheep this year. Guess I'll turn it over. No, give it with joy. You know, if you've lost your job, if you've suffered, if you've been frivolous in your ways and you've repented and God has convicted you and called you back to him, and you have just the bare minimum of what you have and you're willing to lay it before the Lord, do it, and do it with joy. And it says in 18, and they set the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their courses for the service of God, which is at Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses. And so they're referring back to the book of Deuteronomy, or the book, or in Exodus, when or Leviticus, when the law was written. And they're going back now, not backtracking, but they're returning to the foundation that God gave them and how they should live and how they should handle the temple and their lives. And so they're referring back to the word that he provided. And so many of us, when we come back, we go to the Bible because that's the word God gave us. And that's where you should start. And it says, and the children of the captivity kept the Passover upon the 14th day of the first month. And so if we go back to Exodus, the 12th chapter, I don't think I put that in the notes either. I'm sorry, you all. We're page surfing today. Okay. The Passover, Exodus, the 12th chapter, the first verse. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household, well, we'll skip this part because it talks about what you should do with the lamb if you don't have enough people to eat a whole lamb. And it tells them at 5, your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats. And you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And so this was God giving them the instructions for how they would observe the Passover. And the reason why I started at the first verse is because they kept it. It says the Passover upon the 14th day of the first month. So they started on day 1. They were supposed to take a lamb and separate it. And this lamb had to be without blemish and a male, I think it said of the first year. And they had to separate that lamb and keep it until the 14th day. And then they were supposed to take it and have it sacrificed. And everyone in the household was supposed to eat the lamb and leave none of it left. The first thing I want to point out is I always say, and Kanisha and I talked about this in another lesson, the Bible is about us. There is so much of us in the Bible. Because what did they do? They do what we did, right? New year, new me. It's the first year. Okay, this is the first month of the year. They're going to start over. We're going to start over. I'm going to get my life together. I'm going to put things in order. I'm going to obey God like I'm supposed to. I'm going to get back in my word and read it like I'm supposed to. That's the same thing we do. That's what they did. They went back to the word, started over, new year, new us. Let's keep the law the way God wrote it and do what we're supposed to do. Now, if you read the Bible, you know that they also do what we do, right? You get a little further down the road and you fall off in your New Year resolution. And what this is a powerful lesson about us to say, please don't do that. You start out strong, you start out right. Follow what God gave you. He gave you all the provision, all the space, all the power, all the strength, all the knowledge and wisdom you need to obey him. Stick to it. So right now, they are, like I said, they separated out the Levites. They put everybody in their right position in their order as they should, and then they kept the Passover as God gave them. And the Passover was so significant because it was when God allowed death to pass over them, and they were freed because of it. And now they are free again, and they're back in the land that God had promised them, doing what he has called them to do. And these celebrations and feasts that they recognize were to help them remember who they were, who God was, and what he was to them. And it says, for the priests and the Levites were purified together. All of them were pure and killed the Passover for all the children of the captivity, and for their brethren the priests, and for themselves. And the children of Israel, which were come again out of captivity, and all such as had separated themselves unto them from the filthiness of the heathen of the land, to seek the Lord God of Israel, did eat. Again, they're following the law, because the priests had to make the sacrifice, and then they had to take it back and eat it. But only those who were converted. You had to be circumcised. You had to be separated. You and I could not participate in the Passover. And so they are following the law as it is written. And this is what this is telling you. It's giving you a clear, detailed explanation that they are obeying God. And kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with joy, for the Lord had made them joyful, and turned the heart of the king of Assyria unto them, to strengthen their hands in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. So this was a good lesson for me, because like I said, I don't turn to Ezra and Nehemiah. It's not my go-to books, right? But it is so applicable to us as people. We are exiles. We are living in a world that is not our home. And God has created a space through his grace and his power for us to prosper, to build his house. And this time it's not a structure that is tangible, but to build his kingdom. He has given us the resources, and even those heathens that don't believe and don't understand and don't worship with us, God opens up their hand to pave the way. And we got to return back to the book, do what he said do, and do it with joy. And know that while it may not measure in scale to some other things we used to do, or we saw someone else do, or the way we wanted to do, we can do his work with great joy. Because regardless of how great or grand that temple was or was not, and we know that it was not in comparison to the one that was before, it is still a powerful structure in our learning of God and his people today. So it was very important that they do that work, and that we see what happens when God gives us grace to return. And so for many of us, God has given us grace to return. And so let us return, and to sacrifice, and to love, and to follow him with great joy. So, and keep doing it. We don't want to do it like it was in this book, though, where we fall off in the next couple of chapters. We want to keep doing it. So, lesson aim, by the end of the lesson, we will understand that we should celebrate with joy what God has done in our lives. And so I think I've covered that. Desire to celebrate God's blessings with joy. And so, desire, you should be drawn to doing it. But also, I like how it says God's blessings, because we want to celebrate some things that we think we need or want to see happen. But, sometimes I look around and I'm like, God did what? I'm surprised. Like the simplest thing, I was praying this morning, because in Church God in Christ, we fast and pray on Tuesdays and Fridays. So this morning I was praying outside, because I was praying in here, and the Lord just compelled me to go outside, and I sat outside on my deck, and I just was like, God, I'm so amazed. Like it's so beautiful that you blessed me just to have this space. I don't have, a 50-room mansion and sprawling acres and, gardens and attendants and stuff. But I just looked around my little bitty space and I was like, God, thank you. I was able to celebrate his blessing with great joy. It wasn't what I was looking for. It wasn't what I asked for. But when I sat down in it, I was like, you did that. You're the only one who could have done that. And so be looking for his blessings. He has so much in store for us, and he's going to do things that we never thought were possible, right? Like having the king tell the people against you to fund your venture, right? And then it says celebrate God's blessing with joy. And so when you identify those blessings, and when you really lay your eyes and your heart on them, don't suppress the feeling. The way they sacrificed, they didn't have as much as the children of Israel had the first time, but with everything that they had, they celebrated it. And we should do the same. Don't be cheap in your praise, y'all. Give him everything that is due him, and everything that is due him is everything. So with that being said, thank you all for joining me. I appreciate you. How are you doing, Sister Paulette? Lovely to see you, and thank you for joining me as well. I will be back next week for next week's lesson, and that is July the 23rd. The following week, I will be out because that is our state's Holy Convocation. So I'll be busy that entire week, and I don't think I'll have time to record. If I do, it'll be a surprise to me and you. May God bless you. If you haven't, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and I will see you next week in Sunday school.